Sergeant Floyd Talbert, known to nearly everyone as Tab, remained one of those men whose presence lingered long after he was gone, yet whose life was never fully pieced together in a simple, complete way. Among the soldiers of Easy Company, he had once been anything but distant. He was central, loud when he needed to be, sharp-tongued at times, but deeply loyal and dependable. The kind of non-commissioned officer men trusted not just because of rank, but because of who he was. During the war, Tab had been woven tightly into the daily lives of those around him. He shared their hardships, their fears, and their rare moments of humor. In foxholes, on long marches, and in the uneasy quiet between battles, he was there, talking, complaining, laughing, and when necessary, leading. His personality left little room for pretense. He could be blunt, even harsh, but there was no question of where he stood with anyone. That honesty, combined with his ability to lead without creating distance, made him one of the most respected men in the company. He rose through the ranks steadily, eventually reaching one of the highest positions an enlisted infantryman could achieve within the company. What made that rise notable was not just the promotion itself, but how he managed it. He did not leave resentment behind him. He remained, in the eyes of the men, one of them. When the war ended, however, the clear structure that had defined his life disappeared. Like many of the men, he returned to a world that felt unfamiliar in ways he had not expected. The transition was not simply about finding work or a place to live. It was about adjusting to a life that no longer carried the same intensity, the same sense of purpose, or the same unbreakable bonds. For Tab, that adjustment proved especially difficult. In the years that followed, he became something of a wanderer. He moved between places, never settling for long. Northern California, Southern California, stretches of time in Hawaii. His life unfolded in fragments rather than in a single continuous thread. Each move suggested a search, though for what, even those who knew him best could not fully say. Perhaps it was peace, perhaps it was belonging, perhaps it was simply distance from memories that refused to fade. As time passed, contact between Tab and the men of Easy Company grew thinner. Letters became less frequent, then stopped altogether. His name, once spoken daily, began to surface only occasionally, often accompanied by uncertainty. No one seemed to know exactly where he was or how he was doing. For men who had once depended on each other so completely, that absence carried its own quiet weight. Years later, when he was finally found, it came almost by chance, through persistence and the connections that still linked the company together. By then, decades had passed. The war had become history, something remembered rather than lived. But the bond between the men had not disappeared, and when one of them made the journey to see Tab, it was as though a missing piece had been restored, if only briefly. The meeting itself was simple. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic speeches, just a shared meal, a few hours of conversation, and the recognition of a friendship that had endured despite time and distance. Tab had changed as anyone would after so many years. His hair had turned gray, and his body showed the effects of age and multiple heart operations. But beneath that, he was unmistakably the same man. He still carried himself with that familiar mix of confidence and rough-edged humor. He still spoke in the same direct way. Time had altered his appearance, but not his core. After the visit, there was a sense that more could have been said, more time could have been spent. But life, as it often does, moved on too quickly. The reunion, though meaningful, was brief. To those who had not known him personally, Tab's presence survived in a different form. To Richard Winter's daughter Jill, for example, he was never just a name from the past. She grew up hearing about him through the words of her father, Richard Winters, and through the letters that occasionally arrived. There was a tone in those mentions, something deeper than casual friendship. It was respect, certainly, but also affection and pride. Through those stories, Tab became part of her world, even without a direct meeting. Over time, that connection took on a more symbolic meaning. He represented not just himself, but the broader brotherhood of Easy Company, a group of men bound together by experiences that few others could fully understand. For the children who grew up around these men, the war was often understood indirectly. It appeared in photographs, some filled with camaraderie, others impossible to fully comprehend. Images of concentration camps brought a sense of fear and confusion, while other photographs carried moments of quiet humor, like the time a mustache was drawn onto Sobel's photograph. These glimpses revealed not just the reality of war, but the humanity of the men who endured it. Yet for the soldiers themselves, those memories were never just images. They were lived experiences that continued to shape their lives long after the fighting ended. To Walter Gordon, Tab was not a mystery at all, but one of the clearest, most straightforward men he had ever known. During the war, they had rarely been more than a few feet apart, sharing the same platoon, the same squad, and the same uncertain future. They spent countless hours talking about where they had come from, about what they hoped to do if they survived, about the ordinary lives they longed to return to. In those moments, rank mattered less than companionship. Gordon, who never rose far in rank, often found himself relying on Tab, not just as a superior, but as a friend. Tab looked out for him, keeping him out of trouble more than once, ensuring that mistakes did not turn into something more serious. It was a loyalty that left a lasting impression. When the war ended and Tab disappeared from contact, Gordon felt that absence deeply. Not knowing where his friend was or how he was living became a source of ongoing concern. The years without answers stretched on, turning uncertainty into something close to loss. When they were finally reunited, it brought a sense of closure, though not entirely of peace. They spent time together again, recalling the past and reconnecting in a way that only those who had shared such experiences could. For Gordon, that reunion became one of the most meaningful moments of his later life. But even then, it was clear that Tab had been fighting a different kind of battle. Like many of the men of Easy Company, he had been wounded during the war. Those injuries, visible and understood, were only part of the story. The more difficult struggle came afterward, in the quiet years of civilian life. Others adapted, learning to live with their injuries, reshaping their lives around them. Tab seemed to remain in conflict with something less tangible. It followed him through the years, influencing his decisions, his movements, and his sense of place in the world. He searched for stability but rarely seemed to find it. Each new location offered the possibility of a fresh start, yet none provided a lasting solution. Despite the efforts of his friends, he remained difficult to reach, both physically and emotionally. His life unfolded at a distance, marked by movement and a certain degree of isolation, and yet, even in that, he was not forgotten. When he passed away on October 13, 1982, at his home in California, it came only a short time after reconnecting with the men who had once been closest to him. In that sense, his story closed with a return, however brief, to the people who had known him best. Among the veterans of Easy Company, each man carried forward something from the war. Some bore physical reminders, limps, scars, diminished sight or hearing. Others carried memories that shaped their lives in quieter ways. Most found ways to adapt, to build lives that accommodated what they had experienced. Tab's path had been different. His struggle was less visible, less easily defined, but no less real. He continued to fight long after the war had ended, facing something that could not be seen or easily understood. Even so, those who remembered him did not reduce him to that struggle. They remembered the man they had served with, the dependable NCO, the loyal friend, the soldier who had given everything asked of him and more. In the end, his life could not be summed up neatly. It was marked by strength, by restlessness, by connection, and by distance. But through the memories of those who knew him, and through the stories passed down to those who did not, Sergeant Floyd Talbert remained present, not as a mystery, but as a man who had lived fully, fought hard, and left an impression that time could not erase.